The morning Clara's husband died, the sky had been the color of old bone. 3 years later, it still hadn't changed. She stood on the porch of the ranch house. Calling it a house was generous. It was more a collection of weathered boards held together by stubbornness and tenpenny nails, and watched the sun climb over land that looked like it had given up. The grass had gone from brown to gray to something that wasn't really a color at all, just the absence of life. Cracks ran through the earth like veins on the back of an old woman's hand. Her cattle, what was left of them, stood motionless in the distance. 23 head. She'd started with 60. "Mama?" Clara turned. Eli stood in the doorway, barefoot, his nightshirt hanging past his knees. 9 years old and already carrying the weight of a man twice his age in those eyes. Eyes the same shade of blue as his father's, the kind of blue that used to promise everything. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." He scratched his ankle with his other foot. "Chester's down." Clara's jaw tightened. Chester was their best bull. Had been. "How long?" "Don't know. Found him when I went to check the trough." She nodded once. "Get dressed. We'll bury him before the heat gets bad." Eli disappeared back inside. Clara stayed on the porch, gripping the railing. The wood was rough under her palms, worn smooth in places by 3 years of the same grip, the same worry, the same calculation of how many more days they had before the math stopped adding up. The well was at 30 feet and dropping. The creek had been dry since April. It was now late August, and the only water for miles came from that well or from the rain that refused to fall. She'd been hauling buckets to keep the kitchen garden alive, rationing what was left for the animals, watching the level drop inch by inch like a countdown to some inevitable ending she was too tired to name. Thomas would have known what to do. Thomas always knew what to do. But Thomas had been dead for 3 years, and knowing what to do hadn't been enough to stop a spooked horse from throwing him headfirst into a fence post. She went inside. The house was 2 rooms and a loft, bedroom, everything else, and where Eli slept above it all. The furniture was practical and spare. A table, chairs, a stove that worked when it felt like it. The walls were bare except for one photograph, her and Thomas on their wedding day, both of them looking like they believed the future was something you could count on. Stupid. She pulled on her boots, men's boots because they lasted longer, and jammed her hat on her head. By the time she got outside, Eli had the shovel. They walked to where Chester lay on his side near the empty water trough, tongue lolling, flies already gathering. The smell was starting. Clara had buried enough cattle in the last year to know what came next if you didn't move fast. "You take the front legs," she said. "I'll get the back." It took them 20 minutes to drag the bull far enough from the house that the smell wouldn't reach them when the wind shifted. Eli didn't complain. He never did. That was the problem. A 9-year-old shouldn't know how to bury a bull without being told, shouldn't accept it as just another part of the day. They dug in silence. The ground was hard as iron, and every shovelful felt like chipping away at stone. Clara's hands blistered, then bled. She didn't stop. Eli matched her, shovel for shovel, breath for breath. When the hole was deep enough, they rolled Chester in. He landed with a thud that seemed too final, too heavy. Clara stood there for a moment, leaning on the shovel, sweat running down her back. "Mama?" Eli's voice was small. "Are we going to make it?" She wanted to lie, wanted to tell him that everything would be fine, that the rain would come, that the bank would give them more time, that the land would heal and the cattle would multiply, and they'd wake up one morning to find that all of this had just been a bad dream. Instead, she said, "We're going to try." It wasn't much, but it was all she had. They rode into town 2 days later. Granger wasn't much, a main street, a general store, a saloon, a church that did better business than it deserved, and a bank that did even better. The buildings looked tired, sun-bleached and sagging, like everything else in this part of Texas. Clara tied the wagon outside the bank and told Eli to stay put. He nodded, eyes already tracking the other kids playing in the street. None of them came over. Their mothers had made sure of that. Inside, the bank was cooler, quieter, too quiet. The kind of quiet that made you aware of every footstep, every breath. A young clerk looked up from his desk, then quickly looked away. Clara ignored him and walked straight to the back office. Warren Sibley sat behind his desk like a man who'd never missed a meal in his life, thick around the middle, with a face that was all soft edges and cold calculation. He looked up when she entered, and something like sympathy crossed his face. She hated him for it. "Mrs. Whitlock," he gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit." She sat. The chair was uncomfortable on purpose. "I assume you know why I'm here," Clara said. "I do." He folded his hands on the desk. "And I wish I had better news." "You're 3 months behind, Clara. The board's been patient, but—" "Patient?" She leaned forward. "You've raised the interest twice since Thomas died. Market conditions." "Don't." Her voice was flat. "Don't insult me with that. You smell blood in the water, same as everyone else." Sibley's expression didn't change. "I'm a businessman, not a charity." "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for time." "Time's a commodity too, and you're out of it." He pulled a folder from his drawer, opened it. "You owe $840. I can give you until the end of September. After that, I file foreclosure papers." 6 weeks. Clara's mind raced. $840. She had maybe $200 in savings. If she sold everything that wasn't nailed down, the cattle wouldn't bring enough, not in this market. The land itself was worthless without water. "I can pay $200 now," she said. "The rest by December." Sibley shook his head. "End of September. That's as far as I can stretch. Then I'll lose everything." "You're losing everything anyway." He said it gently, like that made it easier. "Sell now. You might get enough to start over somewhere else. Wait for foreclosure, and you'll leave with nothing." She stood. The chair scraped loud against the floor. "I'm not selling." "Clara, end of September. I'll have your money." She walked out before he could respond, before the cracks in her composure could show. Eli was still on the wagon, kicking his heels against the footboard. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Fine." She climbed up, took the reins. "We're fine." Another lie. But what else was there? The ranch was 15 miles from town, and the ride back felt longer than it should have. The sun beat down like a hammer, and dust devils danced across the road. Clara's mind wouldn't stop moving, running through numbers that didn't add up no matter how many times she rearranged them. $840. 6 weeks. Impossible. They were halfway home when Eli spoke up. "Mama, there's someone at the house." Clara looked up. He was right. A horse stood tied to the porch rail, a gray gelding, lean and tired-looking. On the porch itself sat a man. She didn't recognize him. That alone was enough to set her teeth on edge. Strangers didn't just wander out here, not without reason. She pulled the wagon to a stop 20 feet from the porch and set the brake. "Stay here." "Mama." "Stay." She climbed down, one hand drifting to the rifle she kept under the seat. The man on the porch stood slowly, hands visible, palms out, non-threatening or trying to look that way. He was tall, lean in the way of men who'd missed too many meals, with dark hair that needed cutting and a face that had seen weather and worse. Somewhere in his 30s, maybe. Hard to tell. Some men age slow, others fast. He looked like the latter. "Can I help you?" Clara's voice came out harder than she'd intended. "Good." "Ma'am." He touched the brim of his hat. "Name's Cole Turner. I was passing through, saw your place. Figured I'd ask if you had any work." "I don't." "Saw your fence line. Posts are rotting through in 3 places. Barn roof's got holes. Trough by the north pasture's got a crack in it." He said it matter of fact, not judging. "Plenty of work, seems like." "I don't have money to pay." Wasn't asking for money. Food and a place to sleep would do. Clara studied him. He didn't look dangerous, but then again, the dangerous ones rarely did. His clothes were worn but clean, his boots held together with wire in places. The horse was in better shape than he was, which said something about his priorities. "Why?" she asked. "Why what?" "Why here? Why now? You could ride another 10 miles and hit the Dawson place. They're hiring." Something flickered across his face. "Tried there? They weren't interested. So I'm second choice." "No, ma'am. You're the only choice left." He met her eyes. "I'm not much, and I won't pretend otherwise. but I can work. And if you don't need help, fine. I'll move on. But I figured it was worth asking. She should have said no, should have sent him packing right then. But something in his voice, tired, honest, resigned to disappointment, made her pause. You know anything about cattle? She asked. Some. Fixing things? More than some. She looked at the fence line he'd mentioned. He was right. 3 posts were barely standing. She'd been meaning to fix them for months, but there were always more urgent problems, and the list just kept growing. You can stay in the barn, she said finally. I'll feed you twice a day. You work, you eat. You don't work, you leave. And if I catch you stealing, or if you give me any reason to think my son's not safe, I will shoot you. Are we clear? Yes, ma'am. Good. She turned to the wagon. Eli, get down. Help Mr. Turner with his horse. Eli scrambled down, eyes wide. The stranger, Cole, nodded to him. Obliged, Cole said. Clara didn't respond. She was already wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake. Cole Turner proved himself in the first 3 days. He fixed the fence posts, patched the barn roof, reinforced the water trough. He worked from sunup to sundown without complaint, without asking for direction beyond the first time. He ate little, spoke less, and kept his distance from the house. Eli, predictably, was fascinated. Can I help? He'd ask, trailing after Cole like a shadow. If your mama says it's all right. Clara found herself saying yes more often than she'd intended. It was easier than fighting it, and Eli needed something other than dying cattle and impossible debts to focus on. So she let him hand Cole tools, hold boards steady, learn how to set a fence post properly. She watched from the house, pretending to work on mending while keeping one eye on them. Cole was patient with Eli, explaining things without talking down to him, showing him how to measure twice and cut once, how to read the grain of wood. Small things that Thomas would have taught him if he'd lived. It shouldn't have bothered her, but it did. On the 4th day, she found Cole at the well, staring down into the darkness. How deep is it? He asked without looking up. 30 feet last I checked. Dropping? Every day. He straightened, wiping his hands on his pants. Could dig it deeper. Could. Won't help if there's no water down there to find. Maybe. But maybe there is. He looked at her. I've dug wells before. Limestone country like this, water finds cracks and channels. Could be there's more just below where you stopped. Or could be there's nothing, and we waste time and energy digging for ghosts. True. He didn't push, just stated it and let it sit. Clara stared at the well, at the bucket and rope and pulley that represented the last thread keeping them alive. If they dug and found nothing, they'd lose days they didn't have. But if they didn't dig and the well ran dry, how long would it take? She asked. Week, maybe. If we hit rock, longer. We've got 6 weeks before the bank comes calling. Then we'd better start tomorrow. She almost smiled. We? I'm not much good at standing around. That night, after Eli had gone to bed, Clara sat on the porch with a cup of coffee that had been reheated 3 times and tasted like regret. The stars were out, hard and bright and indifferent. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Another answered. The door creaked behind her. She turned, expecting Eli. It was Cole. Didn't mean to intrude, he said. Saw the light. Can't sleep? Not much these days. He leaned against the porch rail, keeping distance between them. Mind if I ask you something? Depends on the question. Why stay? Clara raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? This place. This drought. The bank breathing down your neck. He gestured at the dark land around them. You could sell, take what you can get, start over somewhere with water. Why stay? She was quiet for a long moment, then, You ever been married, Mr. Turner? Once, long time ago. What happened? She died. He said it simply, without emotion. A fact, nothing more. I'm sorry, he shrugged. Was a long time ago. Clara looked out at the darkness. My husband built this place from nothing. When we got married, it was just land and a dream. He spent 10 years breaking his back to make it real, and then he died, and everyone expected me to fold, the bank, the town, even some of his own family. She took a sip of cold coffee. I stay because leaving would mean they were right, that a woman can't do this alone, and I'll be damned if I give them that satisfaction. Spite's a hell of a motivator. It's kept me alive this long. Cole was quiet for a moment, then, for what it's worth, I don't think you're doing this alone. No? She gestured at the empty land. Who else is here? Him. Cole nodded toward the house, toward where Eli slept. Boy like that, learning what he's learning, seeing what he's seeing, that's not nothing. He shouldn't have to see this, shouldn't have to know what it's like to wonder if there'll be food tomorrow. Maybe, but he's learning something else too. He's learning that when the world knocks you down, you get back up, even when it seems impossible, especially then. Cole pushed off from the rail. I'll let you get some sleep. We start on the well at first light. He was halfway to the barn when Clara spoke. Mr. Turner? He stopped, turned. Thank you for staying. He touched his hat brim. Nowhere else I'd rather be, ma'am. It was a lie, probably, but it was a kind one. But so, they started digging the next morning. Cole had been right about one thing. The work was brutal. The top 30 feet had already been dug, which meant they were starting from rock and limestone and layers of compressed earth that fought every inch. Clara took shifts with the pickaxe, breaking up the stone while Cole hauled buckets of debris to the surface. Eli worked the pulley system, his small hands already developing calluses. By the end of the first day, they'd gained 2 feet. By the end of the third, they were at 35 feet and hadn't seen a drop of new water. Clara's hands were destroyed, blisters on top of blisters, some bleeding, all painful. She wrapped them in cloth every morning and unwrapped them every night, watching the damage accumulate. Cole's weren't much better, but he never mentioned it. This is crazy, she said on the 4th day, leaning on the pickaxe and breathing hard. They were at 37 feet now, working by lantern light because the hole was too deep for the sun to reach. We're chasing nothing. Maybe. Cole was ankle deep in mud and stone, shoveling debris into the bucket. Or maybe we're 1 foot away. That's what you said yesterday. Still true today. She wanted to scream, wanted to throw the pickaxe down and climb out and admit that this was pointless, that they were wasting time they didn't have on a gamble that would never pay off. But she didn't. Because stopping meant accepting defeat, and she wasn't ready for that. Not yet. They dug. On the morning of the 7th day, Clara dropped into the well at dawn and immediately sank to her ankles in cold water. She stood very still, afraid to move, afraid it was a mirage, a trick of exhaustion and desperation. Cole, she called up. Her voice was strange in the narrow space. Yeah? Lower the bucket. He did. She scooped water into it, watched it slosh and settle. Real, cold, clear. Pull it up. The bucket rose slowly, swaying. She heard Cole's sharp intake of breath when he saw it. How much? He called down. Clara looked at her feet. The water was rising, slow but steady, seeping up through cracks they'd finally broken through to. Don't know yet, but it's coming. They pulled her up. She sat on the edge of the well, covered in mud and exhaustion, and something that might have been hope. Eli came running from the house, still in his nightshirt. Is it true? He asked, breathless. Did we find it? Clara pulled him into a hug, not caring that she was filthy. We found it. Eli whooped and ran toward the house, probably to tell the chickens. Cole stood nearby, looking at the bucket of water like it was something precious, which Clara supposed it was. Thank you, she said quietly. Cole shook his head. You did the work. We did the work? He smiled then, just a little. Yeah, we did. For the first time in 3 years, Clara felt something other than the weight of the next problem. It didn't last long, it never did. But for that moment, standing in the morning sun with water in the bucket and her son's laughter in the air, she let herself feel it. The town noticed. Of course they did. In a place like Granger, everyone noticed everything, and a widow keeping company with a strange man was the kind of scandal that wrote itself. Clara first became aware of it at the general store 2 weeks after they'd found water. She was buying flour and coffee when Martha Henderson made a point of turning her back. Literally turned around and pretended to examine canned goods rather than acknowledge her. At the counter, Samuel Wright tallied her purchases in silence, eyes down. Anything else? He asked. That'll do it. He named a price that was higher than last month. Clara didn't argue, just paid and left, feeling eyes on her back the whole way. In the wagon, Eli asked, "Why was Mrs. Henderson being mean?" "She wasn't being mean. She wouldn't look at you." "Some people are just like that." "Because of Mr. Turner?" Claire's hands tightened on the reins. "What makes you say that?" "Jimmy Henderson said his mama said you shouldn't have a man living on your property, that it's not proper." Eli said it carefully, testing the words. "What's that mean?" Clara wanted to explain, wanted to tell him that there were rules in the world that made no sense, that a woman alone was somehow suspect, that survival was less important than appearances. But he was 9. He shouldn't have to understand that yet. "It means people talk," she said instead, "and sometimes what they say is foolish." "Is Mr. Turner going to leave?" "I don't know." "I hope he doesn't." So did Clara, which was its own problem. The real trouble started on a Sunday. Clara didn't attend church often. Sunday was a work day like any other. But Eli liked the singing, and it gave him a chance to be around other children, even if their mothers watched him like he might be contagious. So they went. They were halfway through the service when Reverend Michaels started in on propriety and moral conduct and the dangers of scandal. He didn't name names, didn't have to. Everyone knew who he was talking about. Clara sat very still, hands folded in her lap, eyes straight ahead. Beside her, Eli shifted uncomfortably. Around them, the congregation nodded along, righteous and satisfied. After the service, Clara headed for the wagon. She almost made it. "Mrs. Whitlock," she turned. Reverend Michaels stood on the church steps, flanked by 2 deacons. Behind them, half the town watched. "Reverend, might I have a word?" "I'm in a hurry." "It won't take long." He came down the steps, hands clasped in front of him. A man of conviction, standing up for what was right. That's how he saw himself. Clara saw something else. A man who'd never missed a meal, never wondered where the next dollar would come from, lecturing her on morality from a position of comfort. "I've heard concerning things," he said, "about your arrangement." "My arrangement?" "The man living on your property. Turner, I believe?" "He works for me, in exchange for room and board." "I'm sure that's true, but you must understand how it looks. A young widow, a strange man." "A strange man who's kept my ranch from falling apart," Clara interrupted. "Who fixed my well, mended my fences, and hasn't asked for a dime. That's what he is." Even so, nothing. She was aware of how loud her voice was getting, aware of the people watching, and she didn't care. "You want to talk about propriety? Fine. Let's talk about how the bank raised my interest after my husband died, or how the Dawsons bought my cattle for half what they were worth because they knew I was desperate, or how your congregation turned their backs on me the moment I couldn't afford to tithe." She stepped closer. "Don't you dare stand there and lecture me about appearances when not one of you lifted a finger to help when I actually needed it." Michaels's face had gone red. "Mrs. Whitlock, we're done here." She turned to the wagon, where Eli sat wide-eyed. "Come on, son. We're leaving." They rode home in silence. Claire's hands were shaking, anger and adrenaline making her clumsy with the reins. She'd done it now. Burned whatever bridges were left. But she couldn't bring herself to regret it. When they got home, Cole was in the north pasture, repairing fence. He looked up as they approached, reading something in her expression. "Trouble?" he asked. "The usual kind." She climbed down from the wagon. "Apparently we're a scandal." He was quiet for a moment, then, "I can move on, if it'll make things easier." "No." The word came out harder than she'd intended. "You've done nothing wrong. Neither have I. Let them talk." "Talking's one thing, but if it makes life harder for you and the boy, life's already hard. A little more won't kill us." She met his eyes. "Unless you want to leave?" "Didn't say that." "Then stay." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right." That night, Clara lay awake in bed, listening to the wind and wondering how much more she could take before something broke. The well was fixed, which was good, but the cattle were still dying, the bank was still circling, and now the town had turned from cold indifference to active hostility. 6 weeks until Sibley came for his money. $840. 23 head of cattle that might bring 200 if she was lucky. The math hadn't changed. It still didn't work. But she'd worry about that tomorrow. Tonight, she just needed to sleep. 3 days later, Victor Hale came calling. Clara was in the kitchen when she heard the horses. 3 of them, moving fast. She went to the window and saw Hale dismounting, followed by 2 men she didn't recognize. One of them had a rifle slung across his back. She grabbed her own rifle and stepped onto the porch before they could knock. "Mr. Hale?" She didn't point the rifle at him, didn't need to. Its presence was statement enough. Hale was a big man, thick through the chest and shoulders, with a face that looked like it had been carved from hardwood. He owned the largest ranch in the county, and he'd built it by being smarter and meaner than everyone else. People said he'd killed a man once, over a water rights dispute. People said a lot of things about Victor Hale, and most of them were probably true. "Mrs. Whitlock." He touched his hat brim. "Hope I'm not intruding." "You are. What do you want?" "Straight to business. I like that." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I wanted to talk to you about your situation." "My situation's fine." "Is it?" He looked around at the dying grass, the thin cattle, the ranch that was held together by wire and hope. "Forgive me, but it doesn't look fine." "Mr. Hale, hear me out." He held up a hand. "I know you're in a tight spot with the bank. I know you're behind on payments. And I know that in a few weeks, Sibley's going to foreclose." He paused, letting that sink in. "I'm prepared to make you an offer. One that would let you walk away from this with something in your pocket instead of nothing." Clara's grip on the rifle tightened. "I'm not selling. You don't even know what I'm offering." "Don't need to. The answer's no." Hale's expression hardened. "You're being foolish. You can't win this. The drought's not ending. The bank's not backing down. All you're doing is delaying the inevitable." "Then I'll delay it as long as I can." One of the men behind Hale, the one with the rifle, shifted his weight. Clara's eyes flicked to him, then back to Hale. "You should think about your son," Hale said quietly. "What happens to him when you lose everything? Where does he go?" It took everything in Clara not to point the rifle at his chest. "Get off my property." "Mrs. Whitlock. Now." For a moment nobody moved. The tension stretched tight as wire. Then Hale smiled again, that same cold smile. "You'll change your mind," he said. "They always do." He remounted, and the 3 of them rode off. Clara stood on the porch until they were out of sight, her heart hammering against her ribs. Cole appeared from the barn, moving fast. "What did he want?" "To buy the ranch." "You tell him no?" "Yes." "Good." Cole's jaw was tight. "He's bad news. Always has been." "You know him?" "Worked for him once, about 5 years back." Cole spat in the dirt. "Worst 3 months of my life. He's got no bottom to him, Clara. If he wants your land, he won't stop at asking nicely." But Clara looked in the direction Hale had gone. "Let him try." But even as she said it, she felt the first real whisper of fear. The bank was one thing. Sibley was a businessman, cold but predictable. Victor Hale was something else entirely, and men like that didn't lose gracefully. That night, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. She checked the rifle twice, made sure the ammunition was where she could reach it, and slept with one ear open. Around midnight, the cattle started bellowing. She was up and moving before she was fully awake, pulling on boots and grabbing the rifle. Cole was already outside, running toward the pasture. She caught up to him at the fence. The cattle were scattered, running wild, eyes rolling white with panic. And in the middle of them, barely visible in the moonlight, were 2 riders pushing the herd toward the open range. "Rustlers," Cole said, already moving. They ran for the horses. Clara's mind was racing. Rustlers were rare these days, too risky with the law getting stricter. But desperate times made desperate men. If they lost the cattle, that was it. Game over. They rode hard, cutting across the open ground to get ahead of the herd. Clara could see the riders now, could hear them whooping and hollering, driving the cattle like it was a game. Cole pulled his horse alongside one of the rustlers and launched himself out of the saddle, hitting the man hard enough to knock them both to the ground. The second rider turned, and Clara saw his face in the moonlight. Rhett Vance, one of Hale's men. "Son of a bitch," she muttered. Vance saw her, recognized her, and grinned. Then he spurred his horse and took off into the dark. Clara had a choice: chase Vance or help Cole. She chose Cole. The fight was ugly, rolling in the dirt, fists and elbows in desperation. Clara dismounted and raised the rifle. Enough! Both men froze. The rustler was younger than she'd expected, maybe 20, with blood streaming from his nose. Cole had him pinned, one arm twisted behind his back. "Who sent you?" Clara demanded. The kid spat blood. "Go to hell." Cole twisted the arm harder. The kid yelped. "Who sent you?" "Nobody. We just—" "Don't lie to me." Clara stepped closer. "I saw Vance. I know who you work for." The kid's face went pale. "I don't know what you're—" Cole jerked the arm. "Talk or I break it." "Hale!" The kid gasped. "Hale sent us. Said to scatter the herd, maybe take a few head, that's all. I swear." Clara and Cole exchanged a look. Then Clara lowered the rifle. "Let him go," she said. Cole hesitated, then released him. The kid scrambled to his feet, clutching his arm. "You tell Hale," Clara said quietly, "that if he sends anyone else onto my land, I won't be as generous." The kid ran for his horse and took off. They watched him disappear into the night. "He'll be back," Cole said. "Hale won't quit just because we caught one of his boys." "I know." They spent the next 2 hours rounding up the cattle. By the time they got them all back to the pasture, the sky was starting to lighten. Clara's hands were shaking, reaction, exhaustion, fear, all of it hitting at once. "You all right?" Cole asked. "No." She looked at him. "But I will be." He nodded. "I'll take first watch tonight. Make sure they don't try again." "Cole, you need sleep. So does Eli. I'll keep an eye out." She wanted to argue, wanted to say she could handle it, that she didn't need protecting. But the truth was simpler and harder. She was tired, bone tired, soul tired. And if Cole wanted to help, she wasn't too proud to let him. "Wake me if anything happens," she said. "I will." She went inside, checked on Eli, still asleep, thank God, and collapsed into bed. Sleep came fast and heavy, dragging her under like a stone. But even in sleep, she could hear the cattle moving, restless in the dark, and somewhere beyond the edge of the property, the sound of men who wouldn't quit. Morning came too fast. Clara woke to find Cole still outside, leaning against the fence post with the rifle across his lap, watching the horizon like he expected it to catch fire. She made coffee strong enough to strip paint and brought him a cup. "You didn't wake me," she said. "Didn't need to." He took the coffee, drank half of it in one go. "Been quiet. That's what worries me." They stood there in silence, watching the sun climb. The land looked almost beautiful in the early light, if you could ignore the cracks in the earth and the cattle ribs showing through their hides and the general sense that everything was one bad day away from collapse. "We need to move the herd," Cole said finally. "Move them where?" "Anywhere but here. Hale knows where they are now, makes it too easy." Clara turned that over. "The south pasture's got better grass. What's left of it?" "How far?" 3 miles, near the creek bed." "The dry creek bed?" "Yeah." She took a sip of her own coffee. It tasted like burned dirt. Perfect. "But there's shade. And if the well keeps producing, we can haul water out there until the rain comes." "If the rain comes." "When?" She said it with more conviction than she felt. "When the rain comes." Cole looked at her, something like respect in his eyes. "All right. When?" They spent the morning moving cattle. It was slow work. The animals were weak, ornery, and in no mood to cooperate. Eli helped where he could, running back and forth with messages, keeping the stragglers from wandering off. By noon, they had most of the herd relocated, and Clara's back felt like someone had taken a hammer to it. "Mama?" Eli approached carefully, the way he did when he was about to ask for something he thought might get refused. "Can I learn to shoot?" Clara stopped what she was doing. "Why?" "Because." He kicked at the dirt. "In case something happens. In case someone comes back." She wanted to say no. Wanted to keep him away from all of this. The violence, the fear, the reality that sometimes the world required you to be ready to hurt people before they hurt you. But wanting didn't change facts. "Ask Cole," she said. "If he thinks you're ready, We'll start with the small rifle. Eli's face lit up. He ran off before she could change her mind. That afternoon, she rode into town alone. She needed supplies, cornmeal, lamp oil, ammunition, and she needed to show her face, let the gossips know she wasn't hiding, let them think what they wanted. She'd learned a long time ago that you couldn't control what people thought, only how you responded to it. The general store was busier than usual. Saturday afternoon, people coming in from the outer ranches. Clara tied her horse and went inside, already feeling the weight of eyes on her. Samuel Wright was behind the counter, same as always. He looked up when she entered, and something like discomfort crossed his face. "Mrs. Whitlock." "Samuel." She grabbed a basket. "I need cornmeal, lamp oil, and 2 boxes of rifle ammunition." "Rifle ammunition's out of stock." Clara stopped. "Since when?" "Since this morning. Sold the last of it to the Hale Ranch." Of course they did. She set the basket down harder than necessary. "When's the next shipment?" "Week, maybe 2. I need it now." "Can't help you there." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Sorry." She wanted to argue, wanted to point out that the Hale Ranch buying out the entire stock of ammunition the day after trying to rustle her cattle wasn't a coincidence, but what was the point? Samuel knew. Everyone knew. They just didn't care. She bought the cornmeal and lamp oil and left without another word. Outside, she nearly ran into Dr. Franklin Marsh. He was a slight man, mid-50s, with gray hair and the kind of face that looked tired even when he was rested. He'd delivered Eli 9 years ago, set Thomas's broken arm twice, and had never once treated Clara like she was less than human just because she wore a dress. "Clara?" He caught her elbow to steady her. "Apologies. Wasn't watching where I was going." "My fault." She tried to move past, but he didn't let go. "I heard about the trouble last night," he said quietly. "Are you all right? Is Eli?" "We're fine." "And Mr. Turner?" "Also fine." She studied his face. "Why do you ask?" Marsh glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Because Victor Hale's been telling people that Turner's dangerous, that he's got a history." "What kind of history?" "The violent kind. Says he killed a man in New Mexico, that he's been running from the law ever since." Clara's stomach went cold. "Do you believe him?" "I don't know what to believe, but I thought you should know what's being said." He released her elbow. "Be careful, Clara. Hale's got half this town in his pocket, and the half he doesn't own, he scares. If he wants you gone, he'll find a way." "Let him try." Marsh shook his head. "That's not bravery. That's stubbornness. And there's a difference." She watched him walk away, then loaded her supplies onto the horse and rode home. Her mind was turning over what Marsh had said. Cole, a killer, running from the law. It should have frightened her, should have made her want to send him packing immediately. Instead, all she felt was tired. When she got back to the ranch, Cole was teaching Eli to shoot. They'd set up targets, old cans on fence posts, and Eli was sprawled on his stomach with the rifle, concentrating so hard his tongue stuck out the corner of his mouth. "Breathe out," Cole said. "Squeeze, don't pull." The rifle cracked, the can jumped and fell. "I got it!" Eli scrambled up, grinning ear to ear. "Did you see?" "I saw." Clara dismounted. "Nice shot." Eli beamed. Cole caught her eye over the boy's head, read something in her expression. "Why don't you go collect those cans?" he said to Eli. "We'll try again in a minute." Eli ran off. Cole stood, dusting off his pants. "What happened?" Clara told him. About the ammunition, about Marsh, about what Hale was saying. Cole listened without interrupting, his face giving nothing away. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, "It's true." "What is?" "New Mexico. I killed a man." He said it flat, matter of fact. "It was self-defense. He came at me with a knife in a bar fight, and I put him down, but his brother was the town marshal, and self-defense didn't matter much after that, so I ran." Clara absorbed this. "How long ago?" 6 years. "Anyone still looking for you?" "Don't know. Maybe. Probably not." He met her eyes. "Does it change things?" She thought about it, really thought about it. This man had fixed her well, mended her fences, taught her son to shoot. He'd worked harder than anyone she'd hired in the last 3 years and asked for almost nothing in return. And yes, he'd killed someone. But so had Thomas once, when a cattle thief tried to shoot him. So had half the men in Texas, if you went back far enough. Violence was just part of the landscape out here, common as dirt and twice as cheap. No, she said finally. It doesn't change things. Something in Cole's shoulders relaxed. You sure? I'm sure. She glanced at Eli, who was gathering cans and chattering to himself. But if Hale's spreading that story, it means he's building a case, trying to turn people against us even more than they already are. So what do? We keep our heads down and our powder dry. She picked up the rifle Eli had been using, checked the chamber. And we don't give them any more ammunition than they already have. That night, Clara sat at the kitchen table with a ledger and a pencil, trying to make the numbers work. $840. 4 weeks left. She had $200 in cash, maybe another $100 if she sold everything that wasn't essential. The cattle would bring $300 if she was lucky, which she wouldn't be. That left her $240 short. $240 might as well have been $2,000. She was still staring at the numbers when Cole knocked on the door frame. She waved him in. Can't sleep? He asked. Not much point. Sleep won't change the math. He sat down across from her, looked at the ledger. How short are you? Too short. She set the pencil down. I've been over it a dozen times. There's no way to make it add up. What about a cattle drive? Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. To where? The markets are flooded. Everyone's selling because of the drought. I'd lose money just getting them there. What about Fort Griffin? I heard they're paying premium for beef to feed the soldiers. That's 200 miles, through territory that's half hostile and all dangerous. But they're paying premium. Clara studied him. You're serious? I am. He leaned forward. Look, I know it's risky, but risky's better than impossible, and sitting here waiting for the bank to take everything is impossible. At least this way, you've got a chance. A chance to lose everything faster. Or a chance to save it. She wanted to say no, wanted to point out all the ways this could go wrong. Bandits, weather, the cattle dying on the trail, getting to Fort Griffin, and finding out the premium wasn't real. But Cole was right about one thing. Sitting here doing nothing was just waiting to lose. At least this was doing something. How many head could we move? She asked. All of them. 23's a small herd, but it's manageable. It's just you and me and Eli. I've moved cattle with less. Clara looked at the ledger again. At the numbers that wouldn't balance. At the 4 weeks that were ticking away like water draining from a bucket. If we do this, she said slowly, we leave the ranch undefended. Hale could walk in and take whatever he wants. He could try that anyway. At least this way you've got a shot at keeping it. She closed the ledger. Let me think about it. Fair enough. But they both knew she'd already decided. Sometimes the only choice was the one that terrified you most. The next morning, Clara told Eli they were going on a trip. He took it better than she expected, probably because he thought it sounded like an adventure, which it might be if you used the word loosely enough. How long will we be gone? He asked. 3 weeks, maybe 4. What about school? School can wait. She handed him a bundle of clothes. Pack light. We're traveling hard. They spent 2 days preparing. Cole checked every inch of tack and gear, mended what needed mending, discarded what couldn't be saved. Clara went through the supplies, calculating weight against necessity. Food, water, ammunition, medical supplies, blankets, rope, a spare rifle in case one broke. It was like packing for a war you weren't sure you could win. On the 3rd morning, they were ready. The cattle were gathered, the wagon loaded, the horses fed and rested. Clara stood on the porch one last time, looking at the ranch, the house Thomas had built, the land they'd broken together, the dream that had turned into a nightmare of slow starvation. You coming? Cole called. She turned her back on it and climbed onto her horse. Let's go. The first day was easy, too easy. The cattle moved well, the weather held, and they made good time. By sunset, they'd covered 15 miles, and Clara started to think maybe this wouldn't be as bad as she'd feared. She should have known better. The second day, one of the steers went lame. They had to put it down and leave the carcass for the coyotes. The third day, they hit a stretch of country so dry, the cattle started refusing to move, just standing there with their heads down, too exhausted to care. It took hours to get them going again, and they only made 8 miles. The fourth day, they found water, a small spring, barely more than a seep, and let the animals drink their fill. It was the first good news they'd had, and Clara let herself relax for about 5 minutes before reality set back in. On the fifth day, they ran into trouble. It was mid-afternoon when Cole spotted the riders, 3 of them, coming from the west, moving parallel to the herd. Not approaching, not leaving, just watching. "Scouts?" Cole said quietly. "For who?" "Don't know. But nobody scouts alone unless they're planning something." Clara checked her rifle. "What do we do?" "Keep moving, stay alert, and hope they're just curious." They weren't just curious. The attack came at dusk, when the light was failing and the cattle were settling for the night. 6 men on horseback, coming in fast from 2 directions. Clara had just enough time to shout a warning before the first shots rang out. Eli hit the ground behind the wagon. Clara fired twice, didn't wait to see if she hit anything, just worked the lever and fired again. Beside her, Cole was doing the same, his shots measured and deliberate. One of the attackers went down. Another veered off, clutching his shoulder. The rest kept coming. Clara's rifle clicked empty. She grabbed the spare, but before she could bring it up, a rider was on her. She saw the man's face, young, scared, desperate, and then his horse slammed into hers and she was falling. She hit the ground hard enough to knock the wind out of her lungs, rolled, gasping, reaching for the rifle. The rider wheeled his horse around, and Clara saw him reaching for his pistol. Then Cole was there, grabbing the man's arm and yanking him clean out of the saddle. They went down together, a tangle of limbs and violence. Clara got to her feet, still trying to breathe, and saw 2 more riders circling. "Eli!" she shouted. "Stay down!" One of the riders made a run at the cattle. Clara brought the rifle up, led him by a foot, and squeezed. The man jerked and fell. His horse kept running. The last 2 riders looked at each other, looked at their fallen companions, and made a decision. They turned and ran. Clara let them go. She was shaking too hard to shoot straight anyway. Cole was still on the ground with the young rider. The fight had gone out of both of them. Cole was bleeding from a cut above his eye, and the kid looked like he'd been kicked by a mule. Clara walked over, rifle ready. "Let him up," she said. Cole did. The kid scrambled backward, hands out. "Don't shoot," he gasped. "Please don't shoot." "Give me a reason not to." We didn't." He was crying now, which made him look even younger. 16, maybe. 17 at most. "Hale said it would be easy. Said you'd run." Clara's blood went cold. "Hale sent you?" The kid nodded frantically. "Said we could take the cattle, sell them, split the money. He said you wouldn't fight." "He was wrong." Clara lowered the rifle slightly. "Who else is with you?" "Nobody. Just us. The others—" He looked at the bodies. "Are they dead?" "I don't know. Do you care?" The kid stared at her, wide-eyed and terrified. Clara felt something twist in her chest. He was just a boy, stupid and greedy and following the wrong man, but still just a boy. "Get out of here," she said, "and tell Hale that the next time he sends someone after me, I won't be as generous." The kid ran for his horse and took off. Cole wiped blood from his face and looked at Clara. "You should have held him," he said. "Could have used him as leverage." "He's just a kid." "Kid or not, he tried to kill us." "I know." Clara's hands were still shaking. "But I've got enough blood on my hands for one day." They checked the fallen attackers. One was dead, shot through the chest. The other 2 were wounded but alive. Clara bandaged them as best she could and left them with water and directions to the nearest town. Then she, Cole, and Eli rounded up the scattered cattle and moved another 5 miles before making camp. Nobody talked much that night. Eli fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted and probably in shock. Clara sat by the fire, cleaning her rifle and trying not to think about the man she'd killed. Cole sat across from her, stitching the cut above his eye with thread and a needle, not even flinching. "You all right?" he asked. "No." She didn't look up. "You?" "I've been worse." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." He tied off the thread, cut it with his knife. "We should keep moving tomorrow. Put as much distance between us and here as we can. Agreed. They sat in silence for a while. Then Clara said, "Thank you for what you did. You'd have done the same." "Maybe." She finally looked at him. "But I'm still grateful." Cole nodded. The fire crackled between them, and somewhere out in the darkness, a coyote howled. The sound was lonelier than it should have been. The next week was a blur of exhaustion and fear. They pushed the cattle hard, stopping only when absolutely necessary. Twice more they spotted riders in the distance, but nobody approached. Either word had spread about what happened, or Hale was regrouping. Clara didn't know which, and she was too tired to care. On the 12th day, they crested a rise and saw Fort Griffin in the distance. It wasn't much, a collection of buildings clustered around a parade ground, surrounded by a wooden palisade that had seen better days. But to Clara, it looked like salvation. "We made it," Eli whispered. "Not yet," Cole said. "Still got to sell the herd." They drove the cattle to the fort's main gate. A sergeant met them there, looked over the herd with a practiced eye. "How many head?" he asked. 23, Clara said. "All healthy. Well fed as we could manage." The sergeant walked through the cattle, checking teeth and ribs. Finally, he came back. "I can give you $30 a head," he said. Clara's heart sank. $30. That was 690 total. Still 150 short. "The price was supposed to be 45, she said. "That was last month. Markets shifted. I drove 200 miles for this. And I'm sorry about that. But 30's the best I can do." He shrugged. "Take it or leave it." Clara looked at Cole. He shook his head slightly. No point arguing. They both knew it. "I'll take it," she said. They spent the night at the fort, in a barracks that smelled like old sweat and regret. The next morning, Clara collected her money, $690 in cash, heavy and real in her hands, and they started the long ride home. The trip back was faster without the cattle. They made 20 miles a day, sleeping rough, eating what they'd packed. On the 5th day, they hit a town called Silver Creek and stopped to resupply. Clara was in the general store when she heard her name. "Clara Whitlock." She turned. A woman stood in the doorway, maybe 40, with gray streaking her dark hair and a face that looked familiar but Clara couldn't place. "Yes?" The woman came closer. "You don't remember me. I'm Sarah Kinney, used to live near Granger before we moved south." It clicked. Sarah Kinney. Her husband had worked the railroad before he died in an accident. They'd had 3 children, all girls. "Sarah." Clara shook her hand. "It's good to see you. How are you?" "Getting by." Sarah glanced at Cole and Eli, who were waiting outside. "I heard about your trouble with Hale." "News travels fast." "It does when it's interesting." Sarah lowered her voice. "I also heard you're looking for money." Clara went very still. "Where did you hear that?" "I have friends in Granger. They said the bank's about to foreclose." "They're not wrong." Sarah looked around, then pulled Clara aside. "How much do you need?" "More than I have." "That's not a number." Clara hesitated. Then, $150. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small pouch. "I can give you 80. It's all I have saved, but you're welcome to it." Clara stared at the pouch. "I can't take your savings." "Yes, you can, because I know what it's like to lose everything, and I know what it's like when nobody helps." Sarah pressed the pouch into Clara's hand. "Take it. Pay me back when you can." Clara's throat went tight. "Sarah, don't." Sarah smiled. "Just promise me you'll fight. Don't let them take what's yours." "I promise." They left Silver Creek with $870. Still 30 short, but closer than they'd been. Clara spent the rest of the ride home doing math, trying to figure out where the last 30 could come from. Sell the furniture, the wagon, hell, her wedding ring if she had to. She'd find it, somehow. They reached the ranch on the 18th day. Clara had been expecting the worst, the house burned, the well destroyed, everything gone. Instead, it looked almost exactly as they'd left it. A little more weathered, maybe, a little more tired, but standing. Eli ran ahead, shouting with joy. Cole and Clara followed more slowly, both of them scanning for signs of trouble. Looks clear, Cole said. Too clear. Clara dismounted. Hale wouldn't just give up. Maybe he's waiting for the bank to do his work for him. Maybe. They unloaded the horses and got settled. That night, Clara sat on the porch with her coffee and her ledger, counting the money one more time. $870. 30 short, 2 weeks until the deadline. Cole joined her. You'll find it. You sound sure. I am. He looked out at the dark land. You didn't come this far to fail now. Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to think that determination and grit would be enough. But she'd learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it real. I should get some sleep, she said, standing. Clara. Cole caught her hand, just for a moment. We'll figure it out. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. I know. But lying in bed later, staring at the ceiling, she wasn't so sure. The money was close, but not close enough. The time was short and getting shorter, and somewhere out there, Victor Hale and Warren Sibley were waiting for her to fail. She fell asleep still counting, still calculating, still hoping that the math would somehow change. It didn't. The morning after their return, Clara woke to the smell of smoke. Not the good kind. Not wood burning in a stove or coffee boiling over a fire. This was different, thicker, meaner, the kind of smoke that meant something was wrong. She was out of bed and running before she was fully awake, grabbing the rifle on the way out. The eastern sky was orange, and it took her brain a moment to register that the sun didn't rise in the east at this hour. The barn was on fire. Cole! She screamed it, already running. Eli, stay in the house! Cole burst from the barn's side door, coughing, his shirt pulled up over his mouth. Behind him, flames licked through the roof boards, hungry and spreading fast. The horses, he choked out. Still inside. They ran in together. The heat was immediate and brutal, like stepping into an oven. Smoke filled the space, thick enough that Clara couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. She heard the horses screaming, high, terrified sounds that cut through everything else. Clara found the first stall by feel more than sight. Her mare was inside, eyes rolling white, hooves crashing against the door. Clara threw the latch and the horse exploded past her, nearly knocking her down. She moved to the next stall, then the next. Cole was doing the same on the opposite side, moving fast despite the smoke. Above them, something cracked. Clara looked up and saw a beam sagging, fire eating through the wood like it was paper. We need to go, Cole shouted. One more. Clara fumbled with the last latch. The door swung open and the gelding inside bolted, slamming her into the wall hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. Cole grabbed her arm and hauled her toward the door. They made it outside just as the roof collapsed inward with a roar like thunder. The sound of it was enormous, final. Clara fell to her knees, coughing so hard she thought she might break something. Eli was there, his face streaked with tears. Mama? She pulled him close, still coughing. I'm all right. I'm all right. They watched the barn burn. There was nothing else to do. No water to spare, no way to fight it. The structure groaned and settled, sending sparks shooting into the pre-dawn sky. By the time the sun actually rose, there was nothing left but smoking timbers and ash. Clara walked the perimeter once the heat died down enough to get close. Looking for what, she wasn't sure. Evidence. Answers. Something to explain how a barn that had stood for 10 years decided to catch fire the night after they returned from Fort Griffin. She found it near the back corner. An oil can, half melted but still recognizable. And in the dirt, fresh boot prints. Too small to be Cole's, too deliberate to be accidental. Cole saw her staring and came over. He looked at the can, then at the prints, and his jaw went tight. Arson, he said. Yeah. Hell? Who else? Clara picked up the can with a stick, turned it over. He couldn't take the ranch by force, couldn't starve us out, so now he's burning us out. We can't prove it was him. Don't need to prove it. We know. She dropped the can. Question is what we do about it. Cole was quiet for a moment, then, we could leave. Take the money, go somewhere Hale's reach doesn't extend. That what you want? What I want doesn't matter. I'm asking what you want. Clara looked at the smoking ruins, then at the house where Eli waited, then at the land that stretched brown and cracked in every direction. This stubborn, dying piece of Texas that had taken everything from her and kept demanding more. "I want to fight," she said. "Even if you lose?" "Especially then." She met his eyes. "Because if I run now, he wins, and I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have made it, if I just held on a little longer." Cole nodded slowly. "All right then. We fight." They spent the rest of the morning salvaging what they could from the barn. Most of the tools had survived, metal didn't burn, even if the handles were charred. The tack was mostly gone, the hay completely. They'd have to rebuild before winter, which meant more money they didn't have. Clara was dragging a half-burned saddle into the yard when she heard horses approaching. She looked up and felt her stomach drop. 3 riders. Warren Sibley in the lead, flanked by 2 men Clara didn't recognize. They looked official in a way that made her nervous. Dark suits, hard faces, the kind of men who got paid to enforce things people didn't want enforced. Sibley dismounted like a man visiting a sick relative, all sympathy and regret. "Mrs. Whitlock," he removed his hat. "I heard about the fire. Terrible thing." Clara didn't lower the saddle. "What do you want, Warren?" "Just checking in, making sure you and the boy are all right." "We're fine." "Good, that's good." He looked at the ruins of the barn, shook his head. "This is what I was worried about. Place is falling apart around you. First the drought, now this." He turned back to her. "I know you went to Fort Griffin. Heard you sold the herd." Of course he had. Probably had someone watching the fort, reporting back. "I did," Clara said. "Get what you needed?" "Close enough." Sibley's expression shifted slightly. "How close?" Clara didn't answer. Sibley waited, then sighed. "Clara, I'm trying to help you here. If you're short, we need to discuss alternatives before the deadline." "I'm not short." The lie came out smooth as glass. "I'll have your money." "All of it?" "Every dollar." Sibley studied her face, looking for cracks. Clara kept her expression flat, gave him nothing. "I hope that's true," he said finally, "because if it's not, I'll have no choice but to proceed with foreclosure. And once that process starts, it can't be stopped." "I understand." "Do you?" He stepped closer. "Because I don't think you do. This isn't personal, Clara. It's business. The bank has obligations. I have a board to answer to. If you can't pay, someone else will buy this land, and you'll have nothing, not even the option to stay on as tenants." "Someone else?" Clara set the saddle down carefully. "Someone like Victor Hale?" Sibley's face went carefully blank. "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm saying it plain. Hale wants this land. He's been trying to take it since Thomas died, and now he's got you doing his work for him." "That's a serious accusation." "Then deny it." Sibley didn't. He just stood there, hat in his hands, looking like a man caught between competing loyalties and choosing the one that paid better. 2 weeks, he said quietly. "If you don't have the money in 2 weeks, I file the papers. After that, it's out of my hands." He remounted and rode off with his 2 enforcers. Clara watched them go, her hands clenched so tight her nails bit into her palms. Cole had been standing by the house the whole time, rifle in hand. He came over now. "How short are we really?" he asked. $30. 30? He let out a breath. "That's nothing. We can find 30. "Where?" "I've sold everything worth selling. The cattle are gone. The barn's gone. We've got a broken-down wagon and some furniture that's held together with hope and nails." "What about the neighbors?" "Someone who'd lend it?" Clara laughed, but it came out bitter. "The neighbors won't even talk to me, Cole. They think I'm running a whorehouse because you sleep in the barn, or what used to be the barn." "Then we take it." She looked at him. "Take it from who?" "Sibley. Hale. I don't care." His voice was hard. "They've been bleeding you dry for 3 years. Turnabout's fair play." "That's robbery." "So is what they're doing. Just legal." Clara wanted to say no, wanted to insist they'd find another way, that stealing was wrong even when the people you stole from deserved it. But she was so tired. Tired of being righteous. Tired of playing by rules that only seemed to apply to her. "Let me think about it," she said. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed watching shadows move across the ceiling, turning the idea over in her mind. $30. It might as well have been 30,000. She'd checked every corner of the house, every pocket, every jar. Nothing. Around midnight, she gave up and went outside. The air was cooler now, almost pleasant. She sat on the porch steps and looked at the stars. The door opened behind her. Eli came out dragging a blanket. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. He shook his head and sat down next to her, wrapping the blanket around both of them. They sat like that for a while, quiet. "Mama?" Eli's voice was small. "Are we going to lose the ranch?" Clara wanted to lie, wanted to tell him everything would be fine, that she had it all figured out. But she'd promised herself when Thomas died that she wouldn't lie to her son about the important things. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe. Where would we go?" "I don't know that either." Eli was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth bag. "I have some money from my birthday, and from when Papa used to pay me for chores." He opened the bag. Inside were coins, pennies, nickels, a few dimes, maybe $2 total. Clara's throat went tight. "Eli, it's not much, but you can have it. For the bank." He pressed the bag into her hand. "I want to help." She pulled him close, this boy who shouldn't have to worry about banks and debts and losing his home. "Thank you, sweetheart. But you keep this. It's yours." "But—" "Keep it." She kissed the top of his head. "We'll figure something out." "Promise?" Another lie, but a necessary one. "I promise." The next morning, Clara rode into town. She had a plan, though calling it a plan was generous, more like a desperate idea that might work if the stars aligned and nobody asked too many questions. She went to the general store first. Samuel Wright looked up when she entered, wariness crossing his face. "Mrs. Whitlock." "Samuel." She approached the counter. "I need to sell some things." "What kind of things?" "Furniture, tools, whatever you'll take." He looked uncomfortable. "Clara, I don't usually buy used goods." "I know, but I'm asking anyway." She set a list on the counter. "These are quality items. Thomas made half of them himself. They're worth something." Samuel scanned the list. "I could maybe give you $10 for the lot." "They're worth 3 times that." "To you, maybe, but I've got to resell them, and used furniture doesn't move fast." He pushed the list back. "10's the best I can do." Clara wanted to argue, but what was the point? She needed the money more than she needed the furniture. "Fine, I'll bring them by tomorrow." She left before he could see her face, before the cracks could show. $10. Added to what she had, that made $880. 20 short, $20. She stood on the sidewalk trying to think. The saloon was across the street, doors open, sound of men's voices drifting out. Men who gambled. Men with money in their pockets. Clara had never set foot in a saloon in her life. Ladies didn't. It wasn't proper. But proper hadn't kept her fed. Proper hadn't saved the ranch, and right now, proper seemed like a luxury she couldn't afford. She crossed the street and walked through the doors. The conversation stopped like someone had cut a string. Every face in the place turned to stare. The bartender, a heavy man with a scar across his cheek, looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "this ain't really the place for—" "I need to play cards," Clara interrupted. "Poker, specifically." Silence. Then someone in the back laughed. "You're serious," the bartender said. "Dead serious." He studied her face, then shrugged. "Your money. Table's in the back." She found 4 men sitting around a worn table, cards and coins spread between them. They looked up when she approached. Surprise, amusement, curiosity. "Gentlemen," Clara said, "room for one more?" The oldest of them, a man with silver hair and a face like worn leather, gestured to an empty chair. "If you got money to lose, you're welcome to lose it here." Clara sat down and pulled out $20. Money she absolutely could not afford to lose. "Let's play." She'd learned poker from Thomas years ago, when they'd had time for things like cards and laughter. She wasn't great, but she knew the basics. More importantly, she knew how to read people. And right now these men thought she was an easy mark. The first hand, she lost $5. The men relaxed, started joking. The second hand, she won 3 back. The third, she folded early. By the 6th hand, she'd figured out their tells. The young one touched his ear when he was bluffing. The fat one only bet big when he had something. The quiet one in the corner never bluffed at all. She started winning. Small pots at first, then bigger ones. The men's expression shifted from amused to annoyed to grudgingly respectful. After 2 hours, she was up $35. "One more hand," she said. The silver-haired man dealt. Clara looked at her cards, a pair of 8s. Not great. The betting started. She called, watching faces. The flop came, another 8. She kept her face neutral. More betting. 2 men folded. It was down to her and the quiet one. The turn. Nothing useful. The quiet one bet $10. Clara studied him. He hadn't blinked, hadn't moved. Either he had a monster hand or he was the best bluffer she'd ever seen. She called. The river. Still nothing. The quiet one pushed all his remaining chips forward. $20. Clara looked at her 3 8s. Looked at the pot. Easily $60 now. If she won, she'd have more than enough for the bank. If she lost, she'd leave with less than she came in with. "Call," she said, pushing her money forward. The quiet one flipped his cards. 2 pair, kings and jacks. Clara showed her 8s. 3 of a kind. She pulled the pot toward her, counted it quickly. $87. Added to what she had, that was more than enough. "Pleasure playing with you, gentlemen," she said, standing. The silver-haired man shook his head, something like respect in his eyes. "You got steel in you, lady. I'll give you that." Clara walked out of the saloon with her head high and her hands shaking. She'd done it, actually done it. She had the money. But the victory felt hollow somehow, because she'd had to gamble with money she couldn't afford to lose in a place she shouldn't have been, playing a game that could have destroyed everything. She rode home in a daze, the coins heavy in her pocket. When she got there, Cole was waiting on the porch. "You all right?" he asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I played poker," she said, "in a saloon." His eyebrows went up. "And?" "And I won." She pulled out the money, showed him. "I've got enough. For the bank." Cole let out a breath. "Clara, that's stupid, reckless. I know." She sat down hard on the steps. "But it worked." He sat next to her. "Sometimes stupid and reckless is all you've got." They sat there as the sun set, not talking, just being. And for the first time in weeks, Clara felt something that might have been hope. The feeling didn't last. 2 days later, she woke to find the well poisoned. She knew something was wrong the moment she drew the first bucket. The water was cloudy, and it smelled wrong. She poured a little out, watched it run brown and foul. Cole came over, took one look, and cursed. "Someone dumped something in there." "What?" "Don't know. Lye, maybe. Or kerosene." He threw the bucket down. "Doesn't matter. Water's ruined." Clara felt the world tilt. The well. Their only source of water. The thing they'd spent a week digging for. The thing that had given them hope when everything else was dying. "Can we clean it?" she asked. "Maybe, but it'll take time, and we'd need to haul every gallon out, scrub the whole thing down." He looked at her. "We talking days?" "Maybe a week." "We don't have a week." "I know." Clara walked to the well, looked down into the darkness. At the bottom, she could see the faint shimmer of poisoned water. Someone had done this, climbed onto her property in the night and destroyed the one thing keeping them alive. Hail. Had to be. One more push to drive her off the land before the bank could take it. "We need to report this," Cole said. "Get the sheriff out here." "The sheriff won't do anything. You know that." Clara's voice was flat. "Hale owns him, same as he owns everyone else." "Then what do we do?" She turned and looked at him. Really looked at him. This man who'd shown up out of nowhere and stayed despite everything, who'd worked himself half to death for nothing but food and shelter, who'd taught her son to shoot and helped her dig a well, and stood beside her when armed men came calling. "We finish this," she said, "one way or another." That night, Claire and Cole rode to the Hale ranch. It was a risk, stupid, reckless, probably suicidal. But Clara was done waiting for men to come to her. If Hale wanted a fight, she'd bring it to his door. They approached from the east, moving slow and quiet. The ranch house was lit up like a festival, windows glowing yellow in the dark. They could hear voices, laughter, men drinking and celebrating something. Clara and Cole dismounted a quarter-mile out and moved in on foot. They got close enough to see through the windows. Inside, Hale sat at a long table with 5 other men. One of them was Sibley. "Well, that confirms it," Cole whispered. Clara watched Sibley laugh at something Hale said, watched him raise a glass in toast. Rage burned through her, hot and clean. They were about to retreat when the front door opened. Rhett Vance stepped out, cigarette in hand. He walked to the edge of the porch, looking out at the night. Clara froze. They were exposed here, barely 50 feet from the house. If Vance turned his head even slightly, he did. His eyes went wide when he saw them. For one frozen moment, nobody moved. Then Vance opened his mouth to shout, and Cole was on him, moving faster than Clara had ever seen anyone move. He hit Vance low and hard, driving him off the porch and into the dirt. They rolled, struggling. Vance got a hand on his pistol. Clara didn't think. She ran forward and brought the butt of her rifle down on the back of Vance's head. He went limp. Cole pushed him off, breathing hard. "We need to go. Now!" They ran for the horses. Behind them, the ranch house door opened and voices shouted. A gunshot cracked through the night, then another. Clara and Cole hit the saddles and rode like hell itself was chasing them. More shots, but they were already too far, already disappearing into the darkness. They didn't stop until they were miles away, the horses blowing hard. Clara's heart was hammering so fast she thought it might burst. "That was insane," Cole said. "Yeah." Clara started laughing. She couldn't help it. The absurdity of it. Sneaking onto Hale's property, getting caught, knocking out his enforcer, and escaping by the skin of their teeth. It was the stupidest thing she'd ever done, but she'd seen what she needed to see. Hale and Sibley, together. Proof of the conspiracy, even if she couldn't do anything with it. "They'll come for us now," Cole said. "Tonight, probably." "Let them come." Clara's laughter died. "I'm done running." They rode back to the ranch and prepared. Cole positioned himself in the loft of what remained of the barn, rifle ready. Clara took the house, with Eli safely locked in the bedroom with instructions not to come out no matter what. She waited by the window, rifle across her lap, watching the road. They came at dawn. 6 riders. Clara counted them through the window as they approached, moving slow and deliberate like men who knew they had all the time in the world. Hale rode in front, Vance beside him with a bandage wrapped around his head. The others she didn't recognize, but they all had the same look, hired guns, men who did violence for money and didn't ask questions. Clara's hands were steady on the rifle. That surprised her. She'd expected them to shake, expected fear to make her clumsy. Instead, she felt calm, cold even, like some part of her had been waiting for this moment since the day Thomas died. The riders stopped 30 yards from the house. Hale dismounted, hands visible and empty, a show of civility before the violence started. "Mrs. Whitlock," he called out, "I'd like to have a word." Clara opened the window. "Say what you came to say." "I think we've moved past talking through windows, don't you?" Hale smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You assaulted one of my men. On my property. That's a serious offense." "Your man was on my property 2 nights ago, poisoning my well. That seems more serious." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Clara raised the rifle, not quite pointing it at him, but close enough. "You've been trying to run me off this land since the day Thomas died. The rustling, the fire, the well. All of it comes back to you." Hale's expression hardened. "You can't prove any of that." "Don't need to prove it. We both know it's true." One of the hired guns shifted in his saddle. Clara caught the movement in her peripheral vision, tracked it. Cole would have seen it too, up in what was left of the barn. She hoped he had a clean shot if things went bad. "Here's how this is going to work," Hale said, his voice dropping the pretense of civility. "You're going to pack up your things and leave. Today. I'll give you $100 for your trouble and we'll call it even." "And if I don't?" "Then things get unpleasant." He gestured at the men behind him. "I've got 6 witnesses who'll swear you attacked us. Sheriff's a reasonable man, but he can't ignore that many witnesses. You'll hang Mrs. Whitlock or spend the rest of your life in prison. Either way, you lose the land." Clara felt her jaw tighten. "That's your play? Frame me for something I didn't do?" "I'm giving you a choice." That's more than most people get. Hale remounted. You've got until sundown to decide. After that, I file charges and let the law sort it out. He turned his horse and started to ride away. The other men followed, except for Vance. He stayed, staring at the house with hatred written clear across his face. You're going to regret that, he said quietly. Then he spurred his horse and caught up with the others. Clara watched them disappear down the road, then lowered the rifle. Her hands were shaking now, all the adrenaline catching up at once. She set the gun down carefully and sat on the floor, back against the wall. Cole came in through the back door. You all right? No? She looked up at him. He's going to take it, Cole. One way or another, he's going to take everything. Not if we fight. Fight with what? We're 2 people against 6 armed men and a corrupt sheriff. The math doesn't work. Cole sat down beside her. So, what do you want to do? Clara was quiet for a long time, then, I want to go to the judge. The judge? Judge Harrison. He's in the county seat, about 40 miles from here. If anyone's going to listen, it's him. That's a long shot. Everything's a long shot at this point. She stood, offered him a hand. But it's better than waiting here for Hale to make good on his threats. They left within the hour, Clara, Cole, and Eli on horseback, riding hard for the county seat. They pushed the horses as fast as they dared, stopping only to water them at a creek that was barely more than a trickle. By nightfall, they were 20 miles out. They made camp in a copse of trees, no fire, eating cold biscuits and dried meat. Eli fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the ride. Clara and Cole sat on opposite sides of the camp, keeping watch. You think the judge will listen? Cole asked quietly. I don't know. Clara stared up at the stars. But I have to try. If I don't, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have saved it. And if he doesn't listen, then we're out of options. She looked at him across the darkness. You should leave, Cole, while you still can. This isn't your fight. Like hell it isn't. You don't owe me anything. Maybe not. He was quiet for a moment. But I owe myself. I spent 6 years running from things, hiding, taking the easy way out. I'm tired of it. So yeah, this is my fight too. Clara felt something twist in her chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We might both end up dead or in prison. Still, she smiled slightly. Thank you. They reached the county seat the next afternoon. It was bigger than Granger, not by much, but enough to have actual streets and buildings that looked permanent. The courthouse sat in the center of town, a 2-story structure with columns that were supposed to look impressive, but mostly just looked worn. Clara left Eli with Cole at a boarding house and went to the courthouse alone. She asked for Judge Harrison and was directed to his chambers on the 2nd floor. She knocked. A voice called out for her to enter. Judge Harrison was older than she'd expected, maybe 65, with white hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He looked up from the papers on his desk when she entered. Can I help you? I hope so, Your Honor. Clara removed her hat. My name is Clara Whitlock. I own a ranch outside Granger and I need to file a complaint. What kind of complaint? Harassment, arson, attempted theft, conspiracy. She took a breath. A man named Victor Hale has been trying to force me off my land for 3 years. He's burned my barn, poisoned my well, rustled my cattle, and he's working with the local banker to foreclose on my property even though I have the money to pay. Harrison set down his pen. That's a serious accusation. I know. Do you have proof? Clara's heart sank. Not the kind that would hold up in court, but I know it's true. Mrs. Whitlock, I sympathize with your situation, but I can't act on accusations alone. If you want to file formal charges, you'll need evidence, witnesses, documentation. The witnesses are either too scared to talk or on Hale's payroll, and the documentation is in a bank controlled by a man who's part of the conspiracy. Clara stepped closer. Your Honor, I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to investigate. Look into Hale's business dealings. Talk to people in Granger. You'll find the pattern. Harrison studied her face. Even if I found evidence, prosecution would take months, maybe years. Can you afford to wait that long? No, I've got 9 days before the bank forecloses. Then I'm afraid there's nothing I can do. He picked up his pen again. I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitlock, but the law moves slowly, and it requires proof I don't have. Clara stood there, feeling the last thread of hope snap. So that's it? Hale wins because he's rich enough to buy everyone off? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. She turned to leave, then stopped. You know what the worst part is? Everyone knows what he's doing. The whole town knows. But nobody will stand up to him because they're too scared or too bought. And the law, the thing that's supposed to protect people like me, can't do anything because it's tied up in rules and procedures that only work if everyone plays fair. She looked back at him. System's broken, Your Honor, and men like Hale know exactly how to exploit it. She left before he could respond. Outside, she leaned against the courthouse wall and fought the urge to scream. She'd gambled everything on this, and it had failed. The judge couldn't help. The law couldn't help. She was out of options and out of time. Cole was waiting at the boarding house. He took one look at her face and knew. No luck? None. She sat down heavily. He wants proof I can't give him in time I don't have. Eli looked between them. So what do we do now? Clara didn't have an answer. For the first time since Thomas died, she genuinely didn't know what to do next. Every path led to the same place, losing the ranch, losing everything, proving to everyone who doubted her that they'd been right all along. We could still run, Cole said quietly. Take the money, go west, start over. And let Hale win? Hale's already won, Clara. We're just deciding how much more you're willing to lose fighting a battle that's already over. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist there was still a way, still a chance, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. It was over. Had been over from the moment Sibley raised the interest rate, maybe even from the moment Thomas died. She'd just been too stubborn to admit it. That night, Clara lay awake in the boarding house bed, staring at the ceiling. In the morning, they'd ride back to Granger. She'd pack what they could carry, say goodbye to the land Thomas had died for, and leave. Find work somewhere. Raise Eli the best she could. Try to build a life from the wreckage. It should have felt like relief, like laying down a burden she'd carried too long. Instead, it felt like dying. Around midnight, there was a knock on the door. Clara sat up, reaching for the rifle before remembering where she was. Who is it? Judge Harrison. She opened the door. The judge stood in the hallway, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. Your Honor? May I come in? She stepped aside. Harrison entered, glanced around the small room. Is your son here? Next room, with Cole. Good. He sat down in the room's only chair. I've been thinking about what you said, about the system being broken. Clara waited. You're not wrong, Harrison continued. The law is supposed to be impartial, fair, but it's administered by people, and people can be bought or scared. I've seen it happen more times than I care to admit. He looked at her. I can't help you through official channels, but there might be another way. What way? Warren Sibley is foreclosing on your property based on a debt of $840. Is that correct? Yes. And you have that money? Clara hesitated. I have 867. I won the extra in a poker game. Harrison's eyebrows went up slightly, but he didn't comment. When is the payment due? 8 days from now. Then here's what you do. You go to the bank, you make the payment in full, in front of witnesses. You get a receipt showing the debt is satisfied. He leaned forward. If Sibley refuses to accept payment, or if he claims you didn't pay when you did, that's fraud, that I can prosecute. And if he just accepts the payment and lets me keep the land, then you win. Clara shook her head. It won't work. Hale won't let it. He'll do something before we get there. Ambush us on the road, steal the money, I don't know what, but he won't just let this happen. Probably not. Harrison pulled out a pocket watch, checked it. Which is why I'm going to ride back with you. As an officer of the court, if anything happens to you or that money while I'm present, it becomes a federal matter. Clara stared at him. Why would you do that? Because you're right. The system is broken. And sometimes the only way to fix it is to force it to work the way it's supposed to. He stood. We leave at dawn. Bring your friends and that money. And Mrs. Whitlock? Yes? Don't make me regret this. They rode out before sunrise. 4 of them now: Clara, Cole, Eli, and Judge Harrison. The judge had changed out of his formal clothes into riding gear, and he carried a pistol on his hip that looked well used. "You know how to shoot that?" Cole asked. "I fought in the war, son. I know my way around a gun." They made good time, stopping only when absolutely necessary. By the second day, they were close enough to Granger that Clara could see familiar landmarks. Her stomach was in knots. $867 in her saddlebag. Everything riding on the hope that Sibley wouldn't find a way around Harrison's presence. They were 10 miles from town when the riders appeared, 5 of them this time. Not Hale's men. Clara didn't recognize any of them. They came from the east, moving fast, and spread out to block the road. Harrison held up a hand. "Let me handle this." They stopped. The 5 riders did the same, forming a line across the road. The one in front, a lean man with a scar running down his cheek, touched his hat brim. "Afternoon," he said. "That's a nice horse you've got there, Judge." "It is," Harrison said calmly. "You boys lost?" "Not lost, just passing through." The scarred man looked past Harrison at Clara. "Heard there's a woman traveling this road with a lot of money. Thought we'd offer to escort her, for her safety." "Her safety is already secured, now move aside." "Can't do that." Harrison's hand drifted toward his pistol. "I'm an officer of the court. Interfering with my travel is a federal offense." The scarred man smiled. "Awful long way to federal jurisdiction from here. And accidents happen on these roads." Cole had his rifle out before the man finished speaking. "So do intentional things." The tension stretched tight as wire. Clara's hand was on her own rifle, and she could see Eli trying to make himself small beside her. If shooting started, they'd be outnumbered. But they had Harrison, and they had the high ground of legitimacy. The scarred man's eyes flicked between them, calculating odds. Finally, he shrugged. "Your funeral." He reined his horse aside. "But you might want to watch the road ahead. Heard there's storm coming." They rode past, Clara expecting at any moment to feel a bullet in her back. But nothing happened. The 5 men just watched them go, their presence a reminder that Hale had reached beyond what they'd anticipated. "They'll follow us," Cole said once they were out of earshot. "I know." Harrison didn't look back. "But they won't try anything in town. Too many witnesses." "You hope." "I hope." They reached Granger as the sun was setting. The town looked the same as always, tired, dusty, indifferent, but Clara felt every eye on them as they rode down the main street. Word had spread. The whole town knew what was happening. They stopped in front of the bank. It was closed for the evening, but Clara could see light in the upper windows where Sibley kept his office. "We'll stay at the hotel tonight," Harrison said. "First thing tomorrow. We make the payment." Clara nodded, but sleep seemed impossible. She was so close now. One more night, one more morning. Then either victory or the final proof that the fight had been hopeless from the start. That night, lying in the hotel bed with Eli asleep beside her, Clara heard horses outside. She went to the window and looked down. In the street below, illuminated by lamplight, she could see Hale talking to Sibley. Their voices were too low to make out words, but their body language said enough. Hale was angry. Sibley was nervous. They argued for several minutes. Then Hale grabbed Sibley's coat, pulled him close, said something that made the banker go pale. When Hale released him, Sibley nodded rapidly, his face shining with sweat even in the cool night air. Hale mounted his horse and rode off. Sibley stood there for a long moment, then went back inside the bank. Clara returned to bed, but she didn't sleep. She watched the ceiling and waited for morning. It came too slowly and too fast at the same time. They gathered outside the bank at 9 o'clock. Harrison, Clara, Cole, and Eli. The judge knocked on the door. After a long moment, Sibley opened it. His face was gray, and his hands shook slightly. He looked at Clara, at Harrison, at the money pouch she held. "Warren," Harrison said formally. "Mrs. Whitlock is here to make payment on her debt." Sibley didn't move. "The bank isn't open yet." "It's 9 o'clock. Your posted hours say you open at 9. There's been a complication." "What kind of complication?" Sibley licked his lips. "The debt has been sold." Clara felt the ground shift. "What?" "Last night, I sold Mrs. Whitlock's debt to Mr. Hale. He's the creditor now, not the bank." Sibley wouldn't meet her eyes. You'll need to make payment to him. Harrison's voice went cold. You sold a debt the night before it was to be paid? That's convenient timing. It's legal. The bank has the right to sell debts. Legal and ethical are different things, Warren. You know that. I don't make the rules. I just follow them. Sibley started to close the door. If you want to pay, talk to Hale. Harrison blocked the door with his boot. Did Hale pay fair market value for this debt? Sibley hesitated. That's confidential. I'm making it my business. How much did he pay? I can't. How much, Warren? $700. The words came out barely above a whisper. Harrison smiled, but it was the cold smile of a predator. So you sold an $840 debt for $700, knowing Mrs. Whitlock had the money to pay in full. That sounds like fraud to me. It's not fraud, it's business. We'll let a court decide that. Harrison pulled out a notebook. I'm filing formal charges against you and Victor Hale for conspiracy to commit fraud. You'll be hearing from federal prosecutors. Sibley's face went even paler. You can't. I can, and I am. Now step aside. They left Sibley standing in the doorway, looking like a man watching his life collapse. Outside, Clara turned to Harrison. What does this mean? It means we go see Hale, and we see if he's stupid enough to refuse payment in front of a federal judge. They rode to the Hale Ranch, the same route Clara and Cole had taken days before. But this time they came in daylight, with authority behind them. Hale was waiting on the porch when they arrived. He'd been expecting them. Behind him stood Vance and 4 other men, all armed. Harrison dismounted slowly. Mr. Hale, I believe you purchased a debt from Warren Sibley. That's right. Mrs. Whitlock is here to pay it in full. Hale smiled. I'm afraid that's not possible. Why not? Because the terms have changed. The debt is now $920, administrative fees, interest on the transfer, collection costs. He shrugged. Standard practice. Clara felt rage burn through her. That's not legal. It's right there in the contract. When a debt is sold, the new creditor has the right to assess reasonable fees. Hale's smile widened. I had a lawyer look it over. Everything's proper. Harrison stepped forward. Let me see this contract. Hale produced a document. Harrison read it carefully, his face giving nothing away. Finally, he looked up. These fees are unreasonable and arbitrary. No court would uphold them. Maybe, maybe not. But fighting it in court takes time. And money. Hale looked at Clara. Do you have time and money to spare, Mrs. Whitlock? Clara felt everything crystallize in that moment. She was right back where she'd started, short on money, out of time, facing an enemy who could twist the rules to suit himself. Hale had found another angle, another way to delay and obstruct until she had nothing left. But then something strange happened. She felt herself letting go. Not giving up exactly, just releasing the desperate grip she'd had on the outcome. She'd done everything possible, fought harder than anyone could have asked. And if this was how it ended, at least she'd ended on her feet. No, she said quietly, I don't have time or money to spare. Hale's smile turned triumphant. Then I'll see you at the foreclosure hearing. Actually, Harrison said, you won't. Everyone turned to look at him. Mrs. Whitlock is making payment of $840, the original debt amount, right now, in front of witnesses. Harrison pulled out his notebook again. I'm documenting this as official tender of payment. If you refuse it, Mr. Hale, you're in breach of the original contract terms, which means the debt reverts to Sibley, who I'm currently charging with fraud. Either way, the debt is satisfied. Hale's smile faltered. That's not... You can't. I can. And I am. Harrison looked at Vance and the other armed men. Anyone who interferes with this legal proceeding will be charged with obstruction. That's a federal offense carrying up to 5 years in prison. The silence stretched out. Hale's face had gone from triumphant to calculating to something that might have been fear. His eyes flicked to his men, but they'd all taken a step back. Nobody wanted federal charges. Finally, Hale spoke. This isn't over. Yes, Clara said, it is. She counted out $840 into Harrison's hands. The judge documented it carefully, had Cole and one of Hale's own men sign as witnesses, then handed Hale the money. The debt is satisfied, Harrison said. If you attempt any further harassment of Mrs. Whitlock, I'll add stalking to the charges I'm already filing. They rode away from the Hale ranch in silence. Clara kept expecting something, gunfire, pursuit, some last desperate move. But nothing came. They made it back to town without incident. At the hotel, Harrison handed Clara an official receipt. Keep this somewhere safe. It's your proof of payment. Thank you, Clara said. The words felt inadequate. I don't know how to... You don't need to thank me. Just keep fighting. Harrison tipped his hat. The world needs more people who won't quit. He rode off toward the county seat. Clara, Cole, and Eli stood in the street watching him go. Did we win? Eli asked quietly. Clara looked down at the receipt in her hands, at the proof that she'd paid what she owed, that the land was still hers. Yeah, she said. I think we did. The victory should have felt bigger, should have felt like the end of something, like crossing a finish line after years of running. Instead, it felt fragile, like a ceasefire that could shatter at any moment. They rode back to the ranch in daylight this time, no need to hide. The land looked the same as when they'd left it, brown, cracked, dying. But somehow different, too. Still theirs. That mattered more than Clara had expected. Eli ran ahead when they got close, whooping and hollering like he'd won a race. Cole and Clara followed more slowly, both of them scanning the horizon out of habit, looking for threats that might not come, or might. You really think it's over? Cole asked. No. Clara watched Eli disappear into the house. But we bought time. That's something. Time for what? To rebuild, to prepare. She looked at the charred remains of the barn, the poisoned well they'd need to clean, the fences that needed mending. To be ready if Hale tries again. He will try again. I know. They dismounted. Clara stood for a moment just looking at the house Thomas had built. 3 years she'd been fighting to keep it. 3 years of watching everything slowly fall apart, and now she had a chance to put it back together, if she could figure out how. That night, they ate a real meal for the first time in weeks. Nothing fancy, beans and cornbread, but it felt like a feast. Eli talked nonstop about the ride to the county seat, about Judge Harrison, about how his mama had stood up to Victor Hale and won. You should have seen her, Eli said to Cole, even though Cole had been right there. She didn't even flinch when Hale tried to scare her. I saw, Cole said, smiling slightly. Your mama's got more backbone than most men I've known. Clara felt her face heat. Enough of that, both of you. But she couldn't quite hide her smile. After Eli went to bed, Clara and Cole sat on the porch. The night was cool, almost pleasant. In the distance, she could hear coyotes singing their lonely songs. What happens now? Cole asked. We clean the well, rebuild the barn, buy new cattle when we can afford it. She was quiet for a moment. I need to pay Sarah Kinney back. The $80 she lent me. That can wait. No, it can't. She gave me that money when she didn't have to, when nobody else would. Clara looked at him. Some debts are more important than others. Cole nodded. Fair enough. They sat in silence for a while. Then Cole said, I've been thinking. About what? About staying, not just as a hired hand. He turned to face her. As a partner, in the ranch. Clara's heart did something complicated. Cole, hear me out. You need help, real help, not just someone fixing fences for food, someone who's invested in making this place work. He gestured at the land around them. I've got some money saved, not much, but enough to buy cattle, repair materials. We could split the costs, split the profits. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired of drifting, tired of working other people's land and moving on when things get hard. He met her eyes. I want something that's mine, or partly mine, something worth fighting for. Clara studied his face in the moonlight. She'd known this was coming, in a way, had felt it building between them over the weeks and months, but knowing and facing it were different things. People will talk, she said. They already do. It'll be worse. A widow and a single man running a ranch together. They'll assume, let them assume. Cole leaned forward. Clara, I'm not asking for anything beyond a business arrangement. If you want to keep it that way, we keep it that way. But I'm asking you to let me stay. Let me help build something real. She wanted to say yes immediately. Wanted to accept the help, the partnership, the future he was offering. But 3 years of fighting alone had taught her to be careful with trust. Give me time to think about it, she said. Fair enough? The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of hammering. She pulled on her boots and went outside to find Cole already working on the well, hauling buckets of poisoned water to the surface and dumping them out. You started without me, she said. Figured we'd get it done faster with an early start. He hauled up another bucket, his shirt already soaked with sweat. This is going to take days. Then we'd better get to it. They worked side by side, bucket after bucket, hour after hour. The sun climbed and the heat built, and Clara's hands blistered and bled through the cloth she'd wrapped them in. But she didn't stop. Neither did Cole. By the end of the first day, they'd pulled maybe a third of the bad water out. By the end of the second, half. On the third day, Eli helped with the pulley system, his small hands getting stronger with each bucket. On the fourth day, they hit clean water. Clara tasted it carefully, expecting bitterness or the sharp chemical taste of kerosene. Instead, it tasted like water. Just water, cold and clear and clean. We did it, Eli said, grinning. Clara pulled him into a hug, not caring that she was filthy and exhausted. We did. That night, she found Cole in what was left of the barn, sketching plans for the rebuild on a piece of old wood with a piece of charcoal. Big barn or small? He asked without looking up. What? We need to rebuild anyway. Might as well do it right, so big barn or small? Clara looked at his sketch. It was rough but clear. A structure twice the size of the old one, with proper stalls and a loft and reinforced walls. That'll cost money we don't have, she said. I've got 160 saved. That'll cover lumber and nails. We can do the labor ourselves. Cole, I'm staying, Clara. Whether you make me a partner or not, I'm staying. So we might as well build something worth having. She looked at him. This man who'd shown up out of nowhere and refused to leave, who'd worked himself half to death for nothing, who'd stood beside her when everyone else had turned away. Partners, she said, 50-50. We share costs, we share profits, we share decisions. Cole looked up, surprise crossing his face. You sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She held out her hand. Partners? He shook it. His grip was strong, calloused, warm. Partners. They spent the next 2 weeks building. Cole had been right about one thing. The work went faster with 2. They framed the barn in 5 days, working from dawn until they couldn't see anymore. The roof took another week, complicated by the fact that neither of them was particularly good at roofing, and they had to redo sections twice. But slowly, it took shape. A barn. A real one. Better than the old one had been. People from town started noticing. A few drove out to watch, probably hoping to see it collapse, or catch fire, or otherwise prove that a widow and a drifter couldn't build something that would last. Clara ignored them. Let them watch, let them doubt. The barn would stand or it wouldn't, and their opinions had nothing to do with it. On the 16th day they finished. The barn stood complete, walls straight, roof solid, doors that actually closed properly. It smelled like fresh wood and possibility. Eli ran through it, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. It's huge! It's big enough, Clara corrected, but she was smiling. That night she rode into town alone. She had $80 in her pocket and a debt to settle. Sarah Kinney lived on the south edge of town in a small house she rented. Clara knocked on the door and waited. Sarah answered, surprise crossing her face. Clara, I wasn't expecting. I came to pay you back. Clara handed her the money. $80, plus 5 more for interest. Sarah looked at the money, then at Clara. You didn't have to pay interest. I wanted to. Clara met her eyes. You helped me when nobody else would. That's worth more than $5. Sarah took the money slowly. Did you keep the ranch? I did. Good. Sarah smiled. I knew you would. They talked for a few minutes. Small talk, nothing important. But when Clara left, she felt lighter somehow. One less debt. One less thing hanging over her. She was halfway home when she spotted the riders, 3 of them, coming from the west. At first she thought they might be from Hale's ranch, and her hand drifted to the rifle. But as they got closer, she recognized one of them, Frank Dawson, her neighbor to the east. They'd never been friendly. Frank had been one of the first to turn cold after Thomas died, but he'd never been hostile either, just indifferent. "Mrs. Whitlock," Frank said, touching his hat brim. "Got a minute?" Clara reined in her horse. "What do you need?" "Heard about what happened with Hale. With the judge." Frank looked uncomfortable. Wanted to say that was well done, standing up to him like that. Clara waited. There was more coming. "Thing is," Frank continued, "Hale's been pressuring a lot of us. Trying to buy up land, squeezing people on water rights, that sort of thing. Most folks been too scared to push back. But not anymore?" "Maybe not anymore." He glanced at the other two riders. Clara recognized them as small ranchers from further south. "We were thinking of forming a cooperative, pool resources, negotiate better prices, present a united front if Hale tries his games again." "And you're telling me this why?" "Because we want you in it." Frank shifted in his saddle. "You proved you can stand up to him. That means something. Plus, you and Turner rebuilt that barn in 2 weeks. That's the kind of grit we need." Clara studied his face. A month ago, Frank wouldn't have given her the time of day. Now, he was asking her to join a cooperative. Things changed fast when you won. "I'll think about it," she said. "Fair enough?" Frank tipped his hat again. "Let us know." They rode off. Clara continued home, her mind turning over the offer. A cooperative meant security, numbers, protection. But it also meant compromise, shared decisions, trusting people who turned their backs on her when she'd needed them most. She'd have to think about it. When she got back to the ranch, Cole was working on fence repairs by lantern light. She told him about the offer. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think people remember who their friends were when times were hard, and forget real quick when times get better." He hammered in a post. "But I also think surviving out here alone is harder than it needs to be. If they're willing to work together, might be worth trying. Even though they're only asking now that we've proven ourselves? Especially because of that. Means they respect strength. That's something you can work with." Clara helped him with the fence, and they worked in comfortable silence until the lantern burned low. She'd think about the cooperative. But not tonight. Tonight, she just wanted to enjoy the quiet satisfaction of work done well. The weeks turned into a month. Clara and Cole bought 6 head of cattle with the money they had left, started rebuilding the herd slowly. The well kept producing clean water. The barn stood solid. And gradually, impossibly, the ranch started feeling less like a losing battle and more like a real operation. Eli shot up 2 inches and started helping with the heavier work. His hands got calloused and his shoulders got broader, and sometimes Clara would look at him and see Thomas in the way he held his head, the way he approached a problem. It hurt. But it was a good hurt. One evening in late October, Clara was checking the fences when she heard thunder. She looked up at the sky. Clouds were rolling in from the west, dark, heavy, promising. She ran for the house. "Cole, Eli, get inside!" They made it to the porch just as the first drops fell. Big, fat drops that hit the dust and sent up little puffs. Then more. Then a downpour. Clara stood on the porch and watched it come down. The first real rain in over a year. The land drank it in desperately. Cracks closing, dust turning to mud, grass that had been dead starting to show hints of green. Eli ran out into it, dancing and shouting. Cole joined him, both of them getting soaked and not caring. Clara watched them for a moment, then stepped off the porch into the rain herself. It was cold and perfect and felt like redemption. The rain lasted 3 days. When it finally stopped, the land looked different. Not healed, that would take time, but better. Like it had remembered how to hope. Clara rode the property line, checking for damage from the storm. Everything had held. The barn, the fences, even the well. They'd built things right. She was near the eastern boundary when she saw the horse, gray gelding, saddled but riderless. It took her a moment to recognize it. Rhett Vance's horse. Clara dismounted and approached slowly. The horse shied away, nervous. She caught its reins and looked around. No sign of Vance. But there were tracks in the mud, leading north toward the creek. She followed them. She found Vance a 1/4 mile up the creek, lying half in the water, one leg bent at an angle that made her stomach turn. He was conscious, but barely, his face gray with pain and blood loss. He saw her, and something like fear crossed his face. "Don't!" Clara knelt beside him, checked his injuries. Broken leg. Maybe broken ribs, bleeding from a gash on his head. His horse must have thrown him, and in the rain he couldn't get back up. "How long you been here?" she asked. "Since yesterday." His voice was weak. "Before the rain." "Over a day. In the cold and wet." It was a miracle he was still alive. Clara should have left him there, should have ridden away and let nature take its course. This was the man who'd burned her barn, poisoned her well, tried to kill her on Hale's orders. The man who'd smiled while doing it. She pulled out her canteen and helped him drink. "Why?" Vance gasped. "Because I'm not you." Clara stood. "Stay here. I'll get help." She rode hard for the ranch, got coal in the wagon, and together they loaded Vance into it. They took him to town, to Dr. Marsh's office. Marsh took one look at Vance and raised his eyebrows. "This is one of Hale's men." "I know," Clara said. "Fix him anyway." Marsh worked while Clara and Cole waited outside. An hour later he emerged. "He'll live, legs set, ribs wrapped. He was lucky you found him." "Will he be able to ride?" "Not for weeks, maybe months." Marsh looked at her. "What are you going to do with him?" Clara hadn't thought that far ahead. "I don't know." As it turned out, she didn't have to decide. Word got back to Hale about what happened, and 2 days later, one of Hale's men came to collect Vance. Clara watched them load him into a wagon, watched them ride away. Vance looked back once before they disappeared. His expression was complicated. Not grateful, exactly, but something close. A week later, Clara got a visitor. Victor Hale rode up alone, no armed men, no threats. He looked older than the last time she'd seen him. Tired. Clara met him on the porch, rifle in hand. "What do you want?" "To talk." Hale dismounted slowly. "That all right with you?" "Depends on what you want to talk about." "My man, Vance, you saved his life." "I found him. Marsh saved his life." "You could have left him there. Nobody would have blamed you." Hale looked at her directly. "Why didn't you?" Clara leaned against the porch rail. "Because leaving him would have made me like you. And I'm not." Hale was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I've been trying to take this land for 3 years. Thought I could outlast you, outsmart you, outspend you. But you're still here." "I am. And I'm tired of fighting." He pulled out an envelope, handed it to her. "This is a deed to the water rights on the creek that runs through both our properties. It's yours, free and clear." Clara opened the envelope, scanned the document. It was legitimate, signed and notarized. "Why?" she asked. "Because you won, fair and square." Hale climbed back on his horse. "And because Vance told me what you did, said you didn't hesitate, just helped him even though he didn't deserve it." He looked at her. "That's the kind of person this land needs, not me." He rode away before Clara could respond. She stood there for a long time, holding the deed, trying to process what had just happened. Cole came out of the barn and saw her face. "What is it?" She showed him the deed. He read it, then looked at her. "Hale giving up," he said. "Didn't see that coming." "Neither did I." They stood together, looking out at the land. Their land now, with water rights secured. The drought had broken. The barn was rebuilt. The herd was growing. They had a partner in Frank Dawson's cooperative, assuming they decided to join. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever would be. There would be more hard years, more fights, more losses. But they'd survived the worst, and they'd done it without becoming the kind of people who left wounded men to die in the mud. That evening, Clara sat on the porch with Cole. Eli was inside, practicing his letters. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple and gold. "I've been thinking," Clara said. "About what?" "About us. This partnership." She looked at him. "It's working." "It is. And I was thinking maybe it could be more than just business." Cole went very still. "More how?" Clara felt her face heat. 3 years of widowhood, 3 years of fighting alone, and now she was fumbling through this like a girl at her first dance. "I care about you," she said, "more than I probably should, more than is smart." She met his eyes. "And I think you feel the same." I do. So maybe we could try, see what happens. Cole was quiet for so long that Clara started to think she'd made a terrible mistake. Then he reached over and took her hand. I'd like that, he said quietly. They sat like that, hands joined, watching the sun go down. It wasn't a grand gesture, wasn't a promise of happily ever after. It was just a beginning, small and fragile and real. Inside, Eli called out that he'd finished his letters. Clara squeezed Cole's hand once, then let go and went inside. Cole followed. Eli showed them his work, careful letters spelling out simple words. Clara praised him, suggested corrections gently. Cole looked over his shoulder, pointing out where the spacing could be better. It felt like family. Not the family Clara had lost, but a new one. Different, harder one, but real. That night, lying in bed, Clara thought about everything that had brought her to this point. Thomas's death, the drought, the bank, Hale's campaign to destroy her, Judge Harrison's intervention, the rain finally coming. She'd lost so much. The man she'd loved, years of her life, peace of mind, security, innocence, if she'd ever had any. But she'd gained something too, strength, resilience, the knowledge that she could be knocked down and get back up, that she could fight impossible odds and sometimes, against all logic, win. The ranch was still here. She was still here. And tomorrow she'd wake up and do the work again. Not because it was easy, but because it was hers. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain-washed earth and new grass. In the distance, cattle lowed. Closer, in the barn, the horses shifted in their stalls. The land was healing. So was she. Clara closed her eyes and slept. In the morning, there would be fences to mend and cattle to check and 1,000 small tasks that kept a ranch running. There would be Cole to work beside and Eli to teach, and a future to build from the wreckage of the past. There would be good days and bad days and days that fell somewhere in between. There would be setbacks and victories and long stretches of just getting by, but she would face them. Not alone anymore, not beaten, not broken, just standing, still standing, and that, in the end, was enough. The ranch house sat solid in the Texas darkness, lights burning warm in the windows. Inside, a woman who'd refused to quit. Outside, land that remembered how to hope. And between them, the future. Uncertain, difficult, but theirs. The story that had started with loss and drought and desperation ended here, in a moment of quiet peace. Not perfect, never perfect, but earned, hard-earned, and worth every drop of blood and sweat and tears it had cost. Clara Whitlock had fought for her land, and she'd won. Not because the fight was easy, but because she'd refused to make it anything else.